Hey folks, it's Rob, and welcome back. We're continuing our series on the Dungeon Master's Rulebook. I'll get there eventually. Um, we're in the rules, procedures, and rules section, which I think maybe we can finish this off today. There's a couple pages left before we hit monsters. Um, we left off here at hit points. So, hit points. A player who rolls a low number of hit points for a beginning character may ask, "Can I roll again?" There are three possible answers. Whatever system you use, apply to all players fairly. So, option A, no. All characters must start with hit points rolled. So that's, you know, as it's presented in the player's rule book, you should just take the die roll you get. If you have a cleric and you roll your d6 for hit points and you got a 4, you have a 4, right? Uh, B. If the result was 1 or 2, roll again. You might choose not to apply this to magic users or thieves who would roll 1 or 2 more often than others as they use 1d4. Honestly, I think you should probably evenly apply that if you're going to do that. It's not a terrible idea for your first level that re-roll a 1 or a 2. It does happen. This is a 3. But if you have a one hit point character, that ain't a lot of. You're doing a lot of not. Don't hit me, please. But honestly, the difference between 1 and 3 hit points isn't that wide. C. Don't roll. All characters start with maximum hit points for their class, plus constitution bonus, if any. A fighter or dwarf starts with 8. A thief or magic user starts with 4. All others start with 6. Roll for hit points normally starting with the second level, which very common. And it's, even with maximum hit points, this is still not necessarily easy to live, especially if you have a small group. Languages. A human character with intelligence of 13 or more knows how to speak and write additional languages. You, the DM, must decide what languages are available. In most D&D games, there are about 20 different languages used by monsters and characters. You may select languages from the list of common languages, or you may allow the player to choose. Or if you wish, you can make up more language names if you think they will be used in your games. It is not necessary to actually make up the languages themselves. Of course not. No one's expecting you to be Tolkien, okay? For example, if you read the monsters section carefully, you will discover that a rock baboon communicates with simple screams, and you may decide to allow this language for player characters. Remember that the undead do not have languages. I mean, if they do communicate, it isn't because there's a special undead language. If like a ghost is communicating, it's probably communicating in a language that it knew in life, right? And it'll be one of the other languages. So the list of common languages is given. And fortunately, there's a nice 20 here. So if you wanted to roll a d20 to determine random languages, go ahead. I don't think random languages is a super great idea. Because maybe you want languages that make sense for the environment your characters start out in, but or maybe useful in a campaign that you're thinking of, but maybe this will inspire your campaign. Who knows? 1. Bugbear. 2. Doppelganger. And wasn't really aware Doppelganger had its own private language. 3. Dragon. 4. Dwarf. 5. Elf. 6. Gargoyle. 7. Gnoll. 8. Gnome. 9. Goblin. 10. Halfling. 11. Harpy. 12. Hobgoblin, which I thought the goblins and hobgoblins basically spoke the same language by and large. 13. Kobold. 14. Lizard Man. 15. Medusa. 16. Minotaur. 7. Ogre or Giant. 18. Orc. 19 Pixie, and 20 is an other human tongue, which, it's up to you in your campaign whether you have other human tongues. Some settings just have one common lingua franca, as we, would have said, the common language for human beings. Or maybe it's just human, right? Instead of common, and maybe humans are a minority in your setting. It's your setting. You do what you're going to do. Listening. Any character may listen for noises. This occurs most often at doors, but may occur anywhere. When an attempt at listening is made, the area must be quiet to result in any success. At a door by a waterfall, for example, listening is nearly impossible. If the area is quiet, all the characters must also be quiet to have any success. This means that everyone must stop and wait while one or more characters listen because armor, weapons, and other items make noise when moving. If any player says, "I'll listen for noises," roll 1d6. So, again, the old d6 here. Okay, I got a 3. You should always roll, whether or not there is anything to hear. Again, with traps, right? If you don't roll, the players know you didn't roll. You don't give them that certainty. To keep the players guessing. If the result is a 1 to 2 for a dwarf, elf, or halfling, any noise being made is heard if conditions permit success. A first or second level thief has the same chances to hear noise as a demi-human. As more levels are gained, the thief becomes more expert at hearing noise. So, another useful aspect of the thief, if the party allows them to do that and, they think to do it. Giving magic users spells. When a player starts a magic user or elf character, the player will ask you what spells the character has in the spell book. The magic user's teacher is a higher level NPC magic user, and the spells come from the teacher. The spell book is assumed in the game can simply be a list of spells kept on the character sheet. You may play the role of the teacher if you wish, but this may also be assumed. The system for spells allows the DM to keep control of the spells used in the game. For example, you may wish to avoid charm person spells. You can avoid it simply by not giving it to the characters. The first spell given should always be read magic. This allows the character to read scrolls found and would be a basic part of the character's training. And I agree with that. Every magic user should have read magic so that they can expand their knowledge. The second spell given to a beginning magic user character should be fairly powerful. You should avoid giving detect magic, light, or protection from evil as the second spell, as there's nearly the same as cleric versions easily acquired by a second or higher level cleric. You may give any second spell to a beginning elf character. The elf's many talents keep that character's class balanced with the others, whereas whatever spells are known. The player of an elf can feel useful in many ways. The spell is an additional bonus, not a character's only specialty. Magic user character is different. The magic user has only one specialty, spells, and suffers from low hit points, poor armor class, and severe weapon restrictions. For magic user characters, good second spells are Charm Person, Magic Missile, Sleep, all useful attack type spells, and Shield, a valuable protection. The Floating Disc, Hold Portal, Read Languages, and Ventriloquism spells are useful. However, the player of the beginning magic user may feel useless in adventure if miscellaneous spells, which include Read Magic, are the only ones known. These spells make good third spells when the character reaches second level. You may wish to give one spell to one beginning magic user and a different spell to another beginner. This increases the number of different spells available to a party. However, be sure to give the spells fairly. Try to give one powerful spell to each to avoid complaints of unfairness. And they shouldn't be swapping spells. Those spells should be private, protected information that they don't want to share with each other. As I said, in this version of the game, there isn't even an identify spell. And if you are playing off the compendium, that is the 13th spell on the first level spells. And you may want to give that in addition to the other spells, or keep that as the third spell that they get. Moving onwards. Lost spellbooks. If a magic user or elf character loses a spellbook, the character has a big problem. Nobody would allow the character to use a borrowed book, and without the book, the character has no spells to memorize. You should always offer some method for the character to find a lost book or gain a new one. This should not be easy. It may involve paying a large sum of money, or an unbreakable promise to pay in the future, a special service or journey, dangerous adventure, or some other method. Remember that the character is heavily penalized by the loss of the book, and the player will probably not have much fun until it is recovered. So, yeah, it's a big deal that they lost their spell book, but at the same time, don't make it such that it's going to be the epic adventure of 10 sessions. That character needs a spell book, and it's going to need something to work with. Maybe you'll give them a different spell book, and now they have different spells to learn. But don't hamstring the magic user character by just preventing them from having a spell book for session after session after session. That's not fun for that character or that player, right? Mapping. Mapping a dungeon is one of the biggest problems for beginning players. You can make it easier by following some simple guidelines. 1. Describe areas clearly and accurately. If you make a mistake, tell the players right away and make necessary corrections. 2. Use the same terms and descriptions and try to describe room details, size of the room, exits, creatures, other contents, in the same order each time. If the players become familiar with certain often used terms, they can map more easily. Some common terms for corridors are side passage or side road. A corridor branches off to the side, but the main corridor continues. Four-way intersection. Corridors branch off to both sides of the main corridor. T-intersection. The main corridor ends at the intersection where the corridors continue left and right. Set a standard description at the start of the adventure for corridors, rooms, walls, and other typical features. For example, if you start by saying, a standard corridor is 10 feet wide and 10 feet high, you can simply say standard corridor instead of describing it each time. Standard walls might be made of stone blocks, each 2 feet long and 1 foot tall, mortared on all sides, and no further wall description is needed unless it differs from the standard. So, yeah, your typical whatever is going on with the setting that your characters are moving through. It'll have some level of consistency, and when that changes, that's notable. So, tell them. But it's a kind of a shorthand and allows your characters to kind of move forward quickly, right? If you're not providing them with a map to begin with. And that's up to you whether you do that, of course. When you design your own dungeons, use straight corridors and straight square rooms at first. You may try other shapes and twisty corridors when you and the players are more experienced, but even then it will slow down the game. And boy, howdy, have I seen some module maps where, like, it's a big old zigzag and, weird twisting corridors. And that's kind of the point in making it, maze-like. But that's not for your starter game. Okay? Keep it fairly simple to describe. Morale, which is an optional rule, again, but is actually a fairly important part of the game. So even though it's considered optional, I think it's a rule you should basically phase in. All right. Morale is a measure of a character's courage, loyalty, and high spirits. It is optional in your first games. The beginning dungeon master should not use morale until all the other game mechanics have been learned. Morale should be added after everyone, both DM and players, have participated in 2 or more group games. In combat, any creature may try to run away or surrender. A character may do this, but this is the decision of the player. No PC can be forced to surrender or run if the player doesn't want to. To determine whether an NPC monster wants to surrender or run away, the DM uses the creature's morale score given with the monster's description. Good morale, a high score, indicates a willingness to keep fighting. Bad morale, a low score, means that the creature may panic and try to get away from combat. The morale score is used when the DM checks morale at certain times by rolling dice. How to check morale. When a morale check is necessary, the DM rolls 2d6. Ta-da. 11? I don't think they broke morale. If the result is greater than the creature's morale score, the creature will try to stop the fight and get away. Oh, no, hi. I am misremembering. Sorry, folks. And excuse me, I do apologize. If the result is greater than the creature's morale score, the creatures will try to stop the fight or get away from it. If the result is less than or equal to the morale score, the creatures will continue to fight. When to check morale. A morale check is not made for any creature with a morale score of 2 or 12. A morale of 2 means that the creature will not fight. They will always give up, surrender, run away. A score of 12 means that the creature will not quit once it has begun to fight. So I believe like skeletons have a morale of 12, for example. So you don't roll morale checks on skeletons because they just don't break until they break, literally. For all morale scores from 3 to 11, a morale check is made twice after combat begins. For a single creature encountered alone, a morale check is made 1. When the creature is first hit, taking 1 or more hit points of damage. 2. When the creature is reduced to 1/4 of its starting hit points, damage for 3/4 or more. So if they started with 4 hit points and they now have 1, that's another morale check. 3 groups of creatures, a morale check is made for the entire group. So firstly, when the first death on either side occurs, either a monster or character. And 2, when half the monsters are not free to act. They are killed, magically asleep, or controlled, held, whatever, right? So, if a goblin has a morale of 7, I just rolled a 7. That's equal to, so that's fine. Will continue fighting after that initial attack. And then, he's down to 1 hit point. That's a 9. He's going to run away. you know. Retainer morale. And again, retainers are kind of important if you don't have many players in low-level play. A retainer's morale is determined by the employer's charisma score and is not checked for every situation occurring in the description above. Instead, a retainer's morale is only checked during an adventure if 1. The employer orders the retainer to endanger himself or herself while the party is in less danger. So if your magic user goes, Smedley, would you go out there and stab that man for me? While he's standing in the back, not getting in danger, that's going to encounter a morale check because Smedley's like, who's this jerk I'm working for? 2, the retainer is damaged and down to 1/4 of the original hit points or less, as damage for 3/4 or more. So, if Smedley decided to go ahead and give that man a good thrubbing, and in the course of that is, maimed, he will have a morale check and reconsider his life choices. Adjustments to morale check. The DM may decide to adjust a morale check by a penalty of +2 or +1, no adjustment, or a bonus of -1 or -2. For example, if the monsters have slain a PC, a morale check is made but with a bonus to the roll. If no monsters have been killed, a -2 bonus is applied, or a -1 if they have lost 1 or more of their group at the same time. If the party is using a lot of magic against the monsters, morale may be penalized due to fear. Results of a morale check. If a creature or creatures fail to make their morale check, or if they will try to get away from they will try to get away from the battle. This could be a retreat or a fighting withdrawal, see the additional rules section in the player's manual, or if neither of those is possible, a surrender. So, you fought them into a corner and they failed their morale check and they can't get around the party, they're going to try to give up. And if an intelligent creature surrenders, it will usually offer treasure from its lair or friends as payment for its life. So it'll be like, please, please, I will surrender. Here, take. Holds out its coin purse, Let live, please. And, play it up. And, if lawful characters strike down surrendering monsters, that might be an alignment check for your consideration. It's up to you. Maybe it's always lawful to strike down evil creatures, but maybe with the ones that are surrendering are the ones that you have to let go. Up to you. You're the DM. But be consistent. All right. Surrender. Though a creature may offer to surrender, the opponent, whether a monster or character, does not have to accept the offer, nor even stop fighting long enough to listen. The DM should play the role of surrendering monster with care. Remember that even non-intelligent creatures will usually act reasonably and run from hopeless battles. Multiple characters. You should not allow beginning players to play more than one character at the same time. It can be hard enough to play the role of one character. Two or more can be very confusing. However, when the players are more experienced, you may consider this as an optional system. If you have 2 towns in your fantasy game world, you may allow each player to have a character in each town. This could be more interesting and allows the players to try different classes. So it's basically like you are holding multiple sessions in the same game world, but they aren't necessarily they aren't necessarily interacting with each other. New rules and items. So during the play of the game, a player will eventually try something not explained in these rules. If a character wants to do something that should be based on an ability score, a test of that score should be used. For example, if a huge boulder blocks the corridor and a fighter says, "I'll try to move it," this action is based on strength. 2 ways a DM might decide to handle this are: 1. If the strength score is or less is rolled on a d20, the attempt succeeds. Penalties for heavier objects are decided by the DM by adding a number to the roll. So, if you have a 17 strength fighter, I rolled an 11. The boulder, let's say it was a +3 boulder, right? And it's a pretty big boulder, but still within the realm of human capability. An 11 certainly does it with the 17 strength character. If the strength score or less is rolled on 3d6, the attempt succeeds. So more or different dice are used for heavier objects. That's 4d6, 5d4, 3d8, 5d6, so forth. And that's an interesting way of doing it. I've not really done that much because the d20 approach is pretty straightforward. But it is interesting from a dynamic result perspective of rolling, say, for example, 4d6 against your strength. Got a 17 strength, and what we got here? We got 10. I got 19. That's a failure, right? This one's 9, 14. Success, all right? You're the DM. You decide how difficult a task is, and once you decide that, you might change it in the future, but try to be consistent, right? If you decide you were wrong, own up to it and go, you know what, this time I'm going to do it differently. But I like the D20. But if you like the other approach, and I think that's actually very interesting, go for it. Be sure to write down any rules you create and apply them fairly to everyone. These are only suggestions. You are free to make up any reasonable rules and apply them as needed. However, remember that more rules are given in the D&D Expert set and even more in the Companion and Masters set. If you create a rule and then find a different rule for the situation in one of these sets, the rule should be changed to the official one. Just tell the players that there's a change to be fair to them. New items and monsters. Experienced Dungeon Masters often make up their own monsters, treasures, spells, and so forth. This is not recommended for beginners. The entire game system is carefully balanced, and a too powerful item is very hard to get rid of once it has been put into the game. When you start to include your own creations, make them similar to the things in this book at first. Magic items usually have charges. Monsters and character classes all have strengths and weaknesses, and spells have definite uses, divided between 2 types. More items are also given in the Expert and Companion sets, and that's true. The equipment list expands quite a bit in those sets. If you're playing with the Compendium, you're just going to get a straight-up equipment list. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But it does represent a breadth of equipment that is not present in the basic set. And again, this is meant to be a starter, so it's not too complicated to buy equipment from, right? It's not so many options that it gets confusing. But it's also stating here, like, don't make up weird magic items that are just too powerful for the situation. Don't give them a +5 avenging axe of beheading. Why are you doing that? These are level 3 and under characters. Questions. And this is very old school, this bit here. Questions. If you don't understand how something is done in the game, look carefully for the rules. Many answers can be found by reviewing all the rules after playing a few games. Some of your remaining questions are answered in the D&D expert set, which is great. You got to buy something else, which gives the rules for outdoor adventuring, NPC specialists such as armor and spy, and many other situations. So it's expanding the game to be fair, but buy something else if you don't think you can't find the answer to your question right away. It's certainly very interesting. You may also find answers from other more experienced players in your area. Definitely. Millions of people play D&D games, and you will find others at hobby shops, schools, libraries, and other places. And that would include the internet nowadays, like where are we right now, right? But back in the day, you had to like find other people in the world. Um, I used Dragon Magazine, right? But that doesn't exist anymore, and that's a whole other thing. We're not going to go on a massive tangent right now. If you can't find an answer to your questions, you may write to the creators of the Dungeons and Dragons game. Please enclose a self-addressed stamped envelope and print or type all your questions. Send them to D&D Basic Questions, TSR Hobbies Incorporated, P.O. Box 756, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin 53147. I wonder if they still even answer. I do. I wonder. I am half tempted to go and put something together, but it was. Do I want to waste a stamp? It's like 73 cents for a stamp nowadays, I swear. It's actually 2 stamps because I have to need to send a self addressed stamped envelope. SACE. How old school. They probably don't have the P.O. box anymore. Retainers. Be sure you're familiar with the rules for retainers from the Player's Manual, page 62. If there are 3 or more players, no retainers should be needed. However, if only 1 or 2 players are available, many dungeons may be too difficult for their characters alone, and you may allow them to find and hire retainers. This will only be necessary if there are very few players and if the player characters are not powerful enough to do well on their own. Fighter characters can usually do well alone, as can clerics, dwarves, elves, and halflings. Just notice what they aren't saying there. There's only so many character classes here. So we said fighters, clerics, dwarves, elves, halflings. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's one of these is left out. You may note. First and foremost, if you want the characters to take 1 or 2 retainers, go ahead and do it. Don't worry about the retainer reactions, pay rates, or other details. Assume that a retainer, or more if you wish, has been found. Hired for a price, just tell the player the amount, and is ready to go. Make up the retainer sheet and start the game. If you and the players decide to make the finding and hiring of retainers part of the game, you should be ready for the following situations. 1. Characters will search for retainers. You should be ready to describe the local tavern in town or some other location where retainers can be found. And that's, your saloon keeper, tavern keeper, innkeeper. Those are, in the old school world, kind of your hookup point for local people who maybe want to do a bit of day labor for you. Many normal men unsuited for adventure would apply for the job. Amongst them should be 1 or more first level NPCs of the type sought. The details of the normal men need not be specified, but you should be ready to describe them generally if the player asks. 3. The details of the NPC hired may be made up instead of rolled. You can assume that an NPC fighter would have above average strength, for example, personality traits such as miserly or hates elves, and can add flavor to the game and help make NPCs memorable and more fun for all. And that's true. If they have something distinguishing about them that helps them stand out, right? And, you'll need some characterization for them. Retainer reactions. When the rate of play is offered and the job described, you should roll 2d6 to see if the retainer accepts the job. You may adjust the roll by +1 for good pay or by -1 for a poor offer. Charisma adjustments should also apply. And again, this is where charisma is actually not just a dump stat, because it affects reactions, it affects retainer morale, it affects the hiring and obtaining of retainers. If the characters are too poor to afford the proper pay for the retainer, you may allow the retainer to accept a half share of treasure found. With such an offer, add 3 to the following die roll. So, that's considered a good deal. So, on a roll of a 2, that would be refused, and they are insulted. Insulted reactions of other potential retainers in the area are penalized by -1. So, you've done so poorly, you've actually made everyone else not like you a bit. 3 to 5, refuse. Yeah, no, never. Yeah. You're mad? Going to the caverns of madness? No one goes into the cavern of madness except for the mad people. 6 to 8, we're going to roll again. 9 to 11 is an accept. And a 12 is an accept, and they are impressed. Impressed, retainers' morale is high for a +1 bonus. So, they're more likely to stick with you because they think you guys are fantastic. So I'm going to do an example roll here and just base pay. So, no modifier for charisma or anything. We got a 6. So that would be a roll again. Now, if we'd offered a half share, 6 becomes 9, which is an accept, right? See how that works? And if they had a charisma bonus of +2, well, let's say they did really well on their charisma roll, that would have been an 8. Still a roll again. But, on our next roll, we got a 4. That actually becomes a 6, keeping them away from refuse. So we're going to roll again. And that's a 2, but the +2 at least makes it just refuse instead of insulting them, right? Didn't work out that time, but what are we going to do? Move on to the next candidate. Retainer morale. The morale of a retainer is a measure of the NPC's willingness to follow a PC into the face of danger. If the morale score is a high number, good morale, the retainer will stand fast. But if it is a low number, bad morale, the NPC may run away in dangerous situation. Morale score is determined by the employing character's charisma score from the player's manual, page 51. It may be adjusted due to PC reactions, rewards, and so forth. Retainer morale should be checked after each adventure and may be checked during adventures. Morale is an optional rule fully explained on page 19. Retainers should not be used without also using the morale rules. Sleep rules. Whenever a magic user or elf casts a sleep spell, the player will ask you for the effect. This powerful spell will affect any normal creatures with 4 + 1 hit dice or less. That's quite considerable, actually. Gnolls, kobolds, goblins, orcs, hobgoblins, those are all affected. I think even ogre. Have to check. But not like a troll or like a giant, right? There is no saving throw against its effects. Undead are not affected, nor are magical or fantastic creatures such as gargoyles, medusa, probably I would say fairies, for example. To randomly determine the number of creatures affected, roll 2d8. Do I have a 2d8? I don't have a d8. I don't think I have a ready 2d8. Oh well. Here's an 8 with 8, and here's another 8 with 5. That's 13, for example, right? The result is the number of hit dice affected. Ignore any additions or subtractions to the hit dice and use the first hit die number alone. For example, lizardmen are 2 + 1 hit dice. Each are treated as 2 hit die creatures. Goblins, 1 - 1 hit dice, are treated as 1 hit die each. So a kobold would actually be considered a 1 hit die creature. And you would just in this case, I'd be able to knock out 13 kobolds. But let's say I had 8 lizard men in front of us. They're 2 hit dice each, so 13. I'm going to knock out basically 6 of them, and I'm going to have to lose that extra hit die that I have there, I think. Victim cannot be partially asleep. For example, the spell is used against 5 tiger beetles, which are 3 + 1 hit dice. You roll 14 on 2d8. 4 the monsters fall asleep while the 5th attacks the party. The extra 2 hit dice rolled are not used. Yeah, see. If cast at a mixed group of creatures, the spell will affect the smallest ones first. Example, the spell is cast in a group of 3 bugbears, which are 3 plus 1 hit dice, 2 ogres, 4 plus 1 hit dice. You roll 12 on 2d8. All 3 bugbears fall asleep, but the ogres are not affected. And hey, I was right about the ogre. Optional. If you wish, you may select the number affected instead of rolling the dice. For example, you may place 7 carrion crawlers, which are 3 plus 1 hit dice, in a room and allow a maximum of 5 to be affected by the spell, leaving 2 for the party to fight. That's you planning an encounter, because you, A, know that your magic user has this sleep spell available to them, and B, are expecting them to be able to use it at this point, because otherwise 7 carrion crawlers is just asking for your party to be knocked out and killed. That paralyze is hard to avoid on a carrion crawler when it has 8 attacks and you're rolling crappy first level saving throws. I'm not going to get into a big diversion though, because we don't want to run. Well, I want to finish this section basically. So, thief abilities. All DMs should be familiar with the special abilities of thieves. If you are not, turn to page 44 of the player's manual and read the descriptions. Most dungeon designs include several traps for only thieves to hopefully find and remove, locks for them to open, and sheer walls for their special climbing skills. When a player says, "My thief character will try to blank," and names one of these abilities, you must roll to determine the success of the attempt. Here, noise is checked by rolling 1d6. All other abilities are checked by rolling percentage dice, d percentile. Ask the player what the percentage chance is for their skill used. If you keep records of the characters in addition to the character sheets, such as index cards, be sure that the thief's percentages are in your records. Roll the percentage dice. If the result is less than or equal to the chance of success given, the attempt succeeds. A failed attempt will often simply have no result. The thief will know, for example, that the lock has not been opened, that no traps were found, that the wall was not climbed, and so forth. However, a failed attempt to remove traps may set off the trap, DM's decision, or may leave it to be triggered when a certain action occurs, opening the chest or door, lifting the item, etc. Attempts to move silently or hide in shadows will only seem successful to the thief. Only the DM knows for sure, based on the result of the roll. You may decide on any result without rolling. For example, if a party is being chased by an unbeatable monster and a locked door stands between them and the exit, you may automatically allow an open locks attempt to succeed to make the game more fun by allowing the party to escape, possibly after fighting the creature for a short time. I would say if you're going to decide that on a success, you should roll the dice and then indicate the success. Just ignore the die roll if you're going to do that. I think that's a fair occasion, but again, you kind of created this situation to happen. Why is there a locked door between the party and escape from the unbeatable monster? Timekeeping. You should keep a careful record of the time used by characters during an adventure. Many spells have given durations. Movement is based on time, and your rolls for wandering monsters are based on time. You may simply make notes of the time used during an adventure, or you can create a system, check marks, boxes to cross off, etc., for keeping track. Personally, I like, during combat, I like to keep a die where I'm keeping track of the round of the combat, and maybe I'm going to use like a 20-sided die, like that bronze D20 I have. That's a count up, count down. That's very handy for that, right? In other scenarios, you might want to keep track of in a broader sense of time instead of just like what time of day it is, and you may want to tick off days or hours on on a scrap of paper behind your screen, just so everyone just so you're keeping track of like how long has elapsed. Some of that is to do with spells, and that makes it important, like how long has it been since a spell was cast, if it has a duration. And some of it is a matter of like keeping track of rations, what time of day is it, how long's when's the next watch. Transferring characters. A player may come to your game with a character created somewhere else. If this occurs, examine the character sheet carefully. In general, you may allow a character to transfer to your game unless A. It is of higher level than the other characters of the game. B. More or better magic items are owned by the other characters. C. If the money owned is more than 50% greater than the amount owned by any of the other characters in your game. So, talking about balance here, really. Any one of these problems may be corrected simply by changing the details in the character sheet, but if allowed to remain unchanged, any one of them can ruin your game. If any changes are necessary, you should talk about them with the player in private before the game. So, you want to join my game and you have this Bob Snagglesmith character who happens to be, within the realm of reason of the level of my party characters, and you're like, but he's like, say, he's like third level, and but he's got like this treasure hoard of magic items and cash. That ain't gonna fly. The other characters are lucky to have one or two magic items each at this point, and there's only so they have like 1,000 gold pieces. There's only so much money and so much real wealth that you're going to bring into your game from another character, and you should probably negotiate with them as to what they can keep, right? Turning undead. Whenever a cleric character tries to turn undead monsters, the player will roll 2d6 and compare the total to the turn undead chart, player's manual, page 25. If the attempt at turning the undead is successful, the player will then ask you how many monsters are affected. To determine the number at random, roll 2d6. The result is the number of hit dice of undead affected. An easy reference chart is given. So, optional, you may decide on the number of undead turned without rolling, if desired. For example, you may place 15 skeletons in an area and give the cleric an automatic maximum 12 turned, leaving 3 for the party to fight. That's pretty dramatic. Assuming the turn is successful, so you've decided how many are going to be turned in that event, but the turn needs to be successful, right? So you can see here, skeletons are 1 hit die each, zombies 2, ghouls 2, wights are 3, wraiths are 4, and mummies are 5 plus 1, which again, don't think we're counting that plus 1 on here. It says here, these monsters are explained in the D&D expert set. They cannot be turned by low-level clerics, but are included here for use with higher-level cleric NPCs. And so you can see next to this is a helpful maximum number of turn, because we're rolling 2d6, right? You have these 2 dice. So skeleton 12, zombies 6, ghouls 6, wights 4, wraiths 3, mummy 2, right? Because you can't turn more than 2d6 hit dice of the thing. And so really, you won't be able to turn a third mummy. God help you if you have to fight 3 mummies at once. But there you go. Higher level clerics versus undead. So level 3 cleric, wight, you need to roll a 9 or better to turn them. Wraith, 11 or better, and you can't turn mummies. Level 4, 7 or better on a wight, wraith, 9 or better, mummy, 11 or better. So finally you can possibly go back. Level 5 cleric, they automatically turn wights, 7 for wraith, 9 for mummies. Level 6 cleric, automatically turn wights, automatically turn wraiths, 7 or better for mummy, and then at level 7 you automatically turn all 3 monsters. So, a wraith looks like a shadow which flies and drains levels as a wight, which, yeah, not fun. A mummy does not drain levels. No, instead a mummy diseases you. It's a monster cannot be partially turned. For example, a cleric turns some wights, 3 hit dice each. Your roll is 8 on 2d6. 2 wights, 6 hit dice, run away. The 2 extra hit dice are not used. If an attempt at turning undead is successful and more undead remain, the cleric may turn them again. Once a failure to turn occurs, further attempts by that cleric have no effect, which is it's a fair thing. Like, I spent one turn successfully turning some skeletons, but there's still so many more skeletons. I can try turning again. The turn monsters will leave the area but may return. They will stay away for 1 to 10 rounds. Roll or choose a time. After the turning wears off, you may decide whether the monsters return or make a reaction roll. If the result of the roll is 8 or more, the undead return. And that completes procedures and rules. We'll now be getting into monsters, but that's going to be for the next video. Thank you very much for your time and attention here. I'm sorry this has run a bit long. We're at 45 minutes, so I will wrap up quickly. Thank you again for being here. Have a great day, everybody. Goodbye.